Hello, everybody. Glad to be with you this afternoon. I already can see that there's a few of you that are joining, and this was kind of put together last minute from yesterday evening, but we've always said we want to try and keep you up to date with the cutting edge and truthful information that you're certainly not going to get through regular media process. So I have with me a very special guest in Patrick Colbeck, who, as you probably have known, has been on the ground of this whole fraudulent thing, the Cobo Hall count, and that since day one. And I want to have him have an opportunity both to introduce himself, talk a little bit about his background, but more importantly, just give us some background, Patrick, on what you witnessed on election night and the day after as they kind of ran in together.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ron. Appreciate the opportunity to get this word out. And before we get into the details there, I just want to say thank you for having this platform to get the truth out, because the amount of censorship that's going on this topic, I mean, everybody sees it with their social media posts. Everybody's understanding it in the media right now. Everybody in Michigan is being told that Joe Biden is the president-elect, right? And I want everybody, first and foremost, to understand that is not true. We need to go off and identify exactly what's happening specific to election integrity. And that's a narrative that's not being allowed to be heard anywhere. This censorship is palpable, and I engaged it, just so you know. It's even billboard suppliers are blocking key messages. When we were going back into discussion of what happened under COVID, I had a billboard, I kid you not, that simply said that the state of emergency is over, effective April 30th, per unanimous Michigan Supreme Court decision. That was blocked from being on display by multiple billboard suppliers. So we are at a point where we need beacons of truth and alternative pathways to get that information out to people. We had a plan to talk about some of the same topics we're going to talk about here today at an 11th congressional district meeting out in our area. And just with just a few hours notice, we had 400 people signed up and ready to go. The restaurant owner contacted everybody and said, we can't do that because we're going to get shut down by the state if we have any more than 50 people at this. So that's another form of censorship that's happening, all in accordance with these COVID guidelines that are being pushed out under the fake assertion that we're still in an epidemic mode. And I just want to highlight to everybody, the CDC definition of epidemic is that it's 7.5% of the deaths that are occurring are due to a specific virus outbreak. We have been below the CDC definition of an epidemic since June 1st of this year, yet she's still using the epidemic statute for public health code to issue this. So I want to have that as a backdrop, is that if there's a reason why you're not hearing the things that we're talking about today, it is because there is a tangible, active censorship that is going on that's leading to quite a bit of a political divide between the people that know what's really going on, which are listeners here at Stand Up Michigan, and those who are just listening to nightly news feeds. So let's go back into what I actually saw on election day here in Michigan. And frankly, you need to understand all this COVID stuff that's been going out of our governor actually fed a lot of the election integrity subversion that we witnessed at the Detroit AV County Board and elsewhere throughout the state. And that's why we need to stand up. We need to get that word out more than ever. So I arrived on election day at November 3rd at around 5 p.m. out at the Detroit AV County Board, which occurs at the TCF Center, formerly known as the Cobo Hall, out in downtown Detroit. And I was there until well after 5 o'clock p.m. The next day. So I was essentially there on a full 24-hour shift with and the stuff that we saw going on there. I had very little need of caffeine, actually, because it got the blood boiling. When I got in there, I don't know if you know my background at all, Ron, but I'm a Microsoft small business specialist, in addition to being a former 2-term Michigan State Senator and ran for governor. I've also done cabling design for the International Space Station. I'm a bit of a techie, and I like zeroing in on that. And one of my biggest concerns around election integrity dealt with chain of custody concerns, specifically those chain of custody concerns around key artifacts such as vote tallies. You guys, we always watch at the on election night, what are the vote tallies? Either we're hitting refresh, and hitting the F5 key on our keyboard on websites, or we're watching the tallies on the nightly news or news networks, cable news networks. And so I wanted to know, how is that vote tally chain of custody preserved from the time somebody casts a vote to the time it's tabulated to the time that tabulation is communicated to everybody? Now, in most precincts throughout the state of Michigan, there's very tight control over these vote tallies. In particular, in my hometown of Canton Township and the western suburbs of Detroit, all the poll workers stay diligently to the end of the night, and they have one goal in mind, and that is to make sure that they have what's called a balanced precinct, which means that all the people who voted are documented in the poll book, and there's an accurate count of the number of votes that we should have. And then there's a number of ballots that's supposed to equal that number of people that voted. If they're not equal, it's an unbalanced precinct. And under Michigan election law, it's not subject to a recount. So that's one of the things I was trying to ensure here in Detroit. And Detroit had a completely different process. They never provided any final report out from their precinct. They had everything staged and ready to go off and do that, but they never got to that point of actually putting out that precinct tape that said, here's the vote tally, which is suspect. So I wanted to understand all the different processes. I understood what I would expect for the rest of the night. And so I wanted to see where that handoff was going to occur. And when I walked in there, what I saw was a bunch of tabulation computers and adjudication computers networked together via Ethernet cables and routers. And when I saw was a connection between the wall connection to an Ethernet jack to a router that was also connected to all those adjudicator and tabulation machines and the Detroit election official computers up on this stage that we weren't allowed to get near. So that tells me that the odds are that this thing's going to be connected to the internet. And sure enough, when you walk around to all the different terminals that were in the TCF center, you could see the internet connection icon. And for those of you who have Windows machines, you go in the bottom right-hand corner, there's an icon there. If you roll over, you put your mouse over, it says connected to internet. Well, all these displays had internet connections on display with them. In addition, there's 134 poll or electronic poll books and at each one of the counting boards in the Detroit AV County Board, and they were organized a little bit differently than most places. Detroit separated out the AV Counting Board from the in-person voting. In-person voting was tabulated and pulled together out at Ford Field. All the AV stuff came to the TCS Center. Why that's a concern is because there were two separate instances of the same poll book. Somebody could vote in person, somebody could vote absentee up to a certain date, and theoretically, people could vote twice in the city of Detroit. And the only way you're going to capture that is when you go off and reconcile the different poll books after the fact. So there's some crazy stuff that was set up just with the infrastructure was put together. And then when you couple that with all the Wi-Fi routers I saw all over the place, I took a snapshot of all the Wi-Fi networks that were active, and one of them was AV_Connect. That tells me that all these devices were connected to the internet, which makes it all compromised from a chain of custody perspective. It's the equivalent of taking your custody room at your local police station and opening it up to the whole world. That's dangerous and subject to vote manipulation, which is, and by the way, when I asked all the election officials in Detroit, I said, "Are you connected to the internet?" I asked Daniel Baxter, who's the chief election official for the city of Detroit, and he said, "No." I go, "Okay." Later on that evening, I talked to one of the senior election officials, a former state representative by the name of David Nathan. I said, "David, are these connected to the internet?" And he said, "No." I go, "Well, I'd like to verify that." And he said, "No, you're going to have to trust me." I go, "David, you might have been lied to. So maybe it's worth going off and investigating. And all you got to do is roll that little mouse over the bottom right-hand corner. You're not interfering with any of the election process or anything, but you can put my mind to rest as a poll challenger with a statutory duty to ensure the integrity of this election. Just roll it over there and everything's quiet and I won't have to worry about this. And he says, you're just going to have to trust me. Well, you know what? I don't trust him. And why is this a concern? Because there are all kinds of data manipulation opportunities where you can go off and adjust the tabulations in the computer remotely, and if other people have access to your machine. And I'll just give you a couple incidents that happened at Detroit related to technology that gives rise to this concern. Number one, we had an observance where 12 of the adjudicator machines had an error message that popped up on the screen that was seemed to be for a remote access issue associated with the adjudicators. We had another one at the electronic poll books roughly about the same time where there was a message that came up that said, warning, this machine is being hacked. Then you flash over to what was happening out in Antrim County, where we had a 6,000 vote flip from President Trump to Joe Biden. And people are trying to tell us, don't look behind the curtain. There's nothing to see there. Well, I'm telling you, I'm looking behind the curtain, and what I see is a disregard, complete disregard for chain of custody concerns. So after being out on the election floor, and I can get into all kinds of other, I kind of put them in the category of penny ante concerns, where people are backdating envelopes and they weren't verifying signatures for absentee voters, which is required by law. All that stuff was happening, and that may account for thousands of votes, but maybe not over 140,000 votes. The stuff that we went off and did, and I'm working with people all over the country to go off and analyze what's happening here. We've got what we believe is evidence of algorithmic data manipulation. What do I mean by that? It means that there's a standard formula in there that essentially says 2 for Joe, 1 for Donald, 2 for Joe, 1 for Donald. And we believe that this is happening inside the voting system at one of the data transfer points. And we've got a lot of software engineers all across the country digging in on that specific information. And we will have that discovery around that in the court of law. But the reason this is important is because just by examining only 3 out of 83 counties with this analysis, we've identified the opportunity for them to have flipped 140,000 votes. And those 3 counties are Kent County, Oakland County, and Macomb County. So that's only 3 out of 83 counties. So I am very concerned about the integrity. It's the reason I talk about the information technology side of this, is because this stuff, we can verify the in-person stuff. When we have a poll challenger witnessing what's actually going on, you know, we may have a lot of disagreements on exactly what happens in certain circumstances, but we're actually there to visibly see what is going on. When it comes to electronic manipulation, particularly for data that's accessible on the internet, we got a concern, and you can manipulate mass amounts of data. So that's what I'm working with. And I want to highlight something. There's something amazing that's happening with this. Is first of all, people are standing up all over the country. I'm getting contact because I've been active on the media and national media all over the place. People are coming from all over the place saying, how can I help? And giving me information that's allowing us to put together all the breadcrumbs that are leading exactly where the smoking gun is. All this stuff is coming together. And these are people, by the way, some of these people are diehard Bernie supporters. Some of these people are just libertarians. All of them are coming together as Americans. They're not in official capacity. Many of them are not, although we do have engagement from key officials out in D.C. that are helping pull all this stuff together and make sure that we've got a cogent case to be pushed forward. But I'm telling you, this is a rise of the American people, the folks that are paying attention, in particular Christians who have their house built on solid rock, not shifting sand. They're in, they're determined, and they're making a difference.
Well, I appreciate that. So we've gone through the election day, and everyone went to bed, or a lot of us did, at 3 a.m. And Trump was ahead by a substantial number. And literally in a matter of 3 or 4 hours, it had completely flipped on its head. Yep. We witnessed something that seemed literally impossible. I know that for so many in Michigan, those that live in the 72 counties that voted in favor of Trump, we saw the lines around these buildings in rural Michigan that had never existed in some people in 30 and 40 years. They'd never seen this energy. And I know, Patrick, you know, we come from a background of, again, not being about a party. This is not about Republicans and Democrats. this is about Americans, but these million or so brand new voters that either haven't voted in the past, voted for the first time, or are standing up the way they are, they're not voting for a party. They're voting for a philosophy. They're voting for independence, individual rights. They're voting for their business rights. They're voting for all the things that everyone's telling us that they're all in favor of this governor. They think she's done a wonderful job. Her popularity, 62%. And I say, those are the same polls that were telling you that Elizabeth Warren and all these people had all this popularity. The fact is, they're just lies. They're manipulation.
Absolutely. And the key thing is, the importance of election integrity goes beyond who the next president is. It goes into securing our system of government for future generations. So this is bigger than any one party. It's bigger than any individual. God bless Donald Trump for everything that he's been doing. He's been taking a stand, very much in the fashion of a lot of our grassroots activists, and he's had a lot of headwinds pushing back against him. Now's our time to rise up and come to his defense, come to the defense of our country.
So let me ask you this then. We went through the first day, and I know there was a lot of energy, but there was a lot of headwind on day 1 and 2 after.
Yeah.
Everyone believed solidly of who won the election. I call a lot of these voters faceless voters that we're so-called up against. I didn't see them standing in line. I didn't see them rounding buildings. I don't see them marching today. No. The question is, who are they? Do they exist even in those numbers? Do we honestly believe it's possible that millions of more people voted for Biden than did Obama? I mean, honestly, the numbers of over 100%, talk for us a minute about that. We have over 100% of who are registered that so-called participated in the election. What are you seeing there?
Well, I think a tally came out that said we had 8.1 million. It was an Epic Time, but I think they put out a statement on it. 8.1 million people voted in the state of Michigan in the last election. There's only 7.8 million that are residents that are eligible to vote. So how do you make up for the difference? First of all, yay, Michigan, if that's true, because it shows a pure dedication into the process of voting. But what we're finding instead is that a lot of these people that actually voted were dead. We got a robust grassroots campaign, again, it's grassroots, pulling together reconciliation of dead voter files against or dead deceased files with the people who voted and reconcile them. And they've got thousands of people who were dead that actually were so dedicated to this election that they rose from the dead to go off and vote. So that's a concern. And there's so much going on here. So that what people don't understand, I want to give a little bit of background on some key control artifacts when it comes to election integrity. And I kind of boil it down to just 4 key artifacts. One of them is that qualified voter file. So who is actually eligible to go off and vote? In Michigan, we call it the QVF, and it's maintained by the state of Michigan, i.e. Jocelyn Benson. And for those of you who don't recall, Jocelyn Benson earlier this year entered into a partnership with an organization called Rock the Vote. Rock the Vote was given direct access into the database to be able to add people into our qualified voter registration file. Now, Rock the Vote's not known for talking to people that are 120 years old and older, so maybe they're not the ones that put them in there, but what other fake registrations they have entered without any oversight? I mean, for me, that is part of the chain of custody that we're talking about in this election. And if there is no independent verification of the data that was entered in by a overtly partisan organization, Rock the Vote, that is step number 1 for subverting election integrity. The next key artifact you have to worry about are the poll books themselves. So in Detroit, they did a data dump. I'm told it was extracted around Sunday night, where they took extracted the precinct level information from the state's qualified voter file and said, here are all the people that are eligible to vote in a given precinct inside of Detroit. And they put all that information into an electronic poll book. So that was a list of all the people eligible to vote in Detroit as of that data dump from the qualified voter file. Well, in the wee hours of the morning on November 4th, we got another paper set of poll book supplements, if you will, that were added to the poll books in Detroit. Now, in Michigan, you recall in 2018, they added the ability to register same day. So that was the explanation that was provided, that these were same day voter registrations. And I think the tally that I heard around that was around 18,000 people registered to vote in the city of Detroit on the day of the election. So, okay, they supplemented that with the electronic poll book. So now it's electronic poll book plus paper poll book equals total poll book. Well, later on in the day, we found out that the city clerk had done something very interesting. See, throughout the day, whenever we saw a ballot come through where the name wasn't in the electronic poll book or it wasn't in the paper poll book, it went into a problem ballot area. City clerk, in all their wisdom, decided that all the ballots that were in that problem ballot area should be added manually into the poll book as they saw fit, and they counted those ballots. So the integrity of that control artifact, the electronic poll book, was superseded by the city clerk with that decree to enter in people that were not in the electronic poll book, not in the same day voter registration paper poll book, but they added them anyway manually. And all these got birth dates of around 1900. So they all had the same birth date. And some of our deceased members here, if you will, they trace back to that data entry. All these things should cause alarm in everybody that's hearing this, right? This is a big deal. Then when you come up, and the next control artifact is the actual ballot itself. And so we have signed affidavits for individuals that were told to backdate those ballots, or those ballots were submitted without a signature and they were still passed through the system saying that's okay. That's against statute. So the integrity there was subverted. And then we have the overall issue of where I focused in on, because I was kind of for the de facto floor leader for independents and Republicans at the AV Counting Board, because everybody was wondering, what do we do? What do we do? They weren't told specifically where to go or what to do or even look for. And so we were sharing all the key information that we kind of serves as a relay point to train all the incoming poll challengers, say, here's the issues you need to be worried about. In particular, they were playing games with the 5-foot or a 6-foot rule. And we had, the actual court ruling that said, yes, we can get within 6 feet. We were sharing that information. There's a lot of things that we were kind of playing quarterback for just to make sure everybody was spun up on. So while they were getting all the detailed affidavits with specific ballots at the individual polls, I was doing kind of the big picture stuff around the IT, and I was concerned about the vote tally specifically. And literally, I asked one of the key election officials, his name is Chris Thomas. He's been a state election official, the state election director for like decades here in the state of Michigan under Republicans and Democrats. And one of the first questions I asked when I got in there was, Chris, help me out here. How are we transferring the tallies from the tabulation machines to the county and other outside interested parties? And he says, I don't know, but I'll get back to you. So I kind of went into the repeat question mode through the rest of the evening until finally I asked him so many times. He said, listen, I'm not going to tell you till after tomorrow night. And keep in mind, my duty as a poll challenger is to ensure the integrity of the election. I have to understand the election processes that are to be followed. He refused to provide that information to me as one of the senior election officials. That tells me that somebody's not interested in a free and fair election. And it adds up to all kinds of examples that we've got for interference. I mean, you guys have probably all seen the cardboard that they put up on the wall. Well, here's a little bit of a backstory on that. I was up training our next batch of poll challengers at the time, and I'm getting this message that says, you got to get down here now. They're about to count the military ballots. Well, why is that important? Well, when you count the military ballots come in a format that is different from what the format that can be read by the tabulation scanners. So there's a manual translation of every vote from the military onto that onto a ballot that is compatible with the scanner. So if you don't have a Republican and a Democrat present during that transfer, what are the odds that somebody afflicted with Trump derangement syndrome is going to fill in the circle for Donald Trump on that new ballot? Not very good. And when I got that notice, I came downstairs to go off and get back in, because I had been in that AV Counting Board all day, and I just came up to the break room to train the next set of challengers. And I was kept from coming back in. And you know what rules that they used for that? They said it was due to COVID capacity restrictions. So all the folks that we've been very quiet on pushing back on the governor's COVID policy. I put out an op-ed on the Detroit News a while back saying that COVID is being used as a means of subverting election integrity. here was a very tangible example of that. And when you go off and highlight the fact that they put up cardboard out there to make sure that nobody could look into what of it, there's no better evidence of the fact that they were deliberately obstructing and interfering with the whole concept of a free and fair and transparent election. So I'm very, very concerned about the integrity of what I saw in the Detroit AV Counting Board, and I think everybody else should be concerned too.
So we go up to where we are today. Some interesting things have happened. We had lawsuits that have been filed. You've been involved in some of those. For the people who haven't heard, just give an update on the ruling that we got today, which was kind of expected, but might as well tell the people what the judge had to say today at noon.
All right, so I have my affidavit to everything that we just talked about here, plus a few other things that were put in there that were violations of statute. My affidavit was submitted as part of a lawsuit submitted by Great Lakes Justice Center. We got a couple of plaintiffs on there. One's Ed McCall, and the other is Cheryl Constantino. They are the lawsuit that we filed was essentially for a temporary restraining order for the counting process in the city of Detroit and the county of Wayne. County of Wayne accounts for 850,000 votes that were cast in the election, and city of Detroit around 250,000. So you can get an idea that this is a significant number of the vote tally. And the reason why the TRO was pursued was because of all these examples of impugning election integrity in this election. So so the judge ruled that, and the exact ruling, we're still waiting for the actual wording. The bottom line is he did not rule in our favor. So now we're pursuing an emergency appeal that goes up to the appeals court. And once it goes to the appeals court, we don't, no matter how it turns out, either they're going to rule in our favor, and then the other side's going to go off and issue an appeal to the Supreme Court, or they're going to rule in their favor and we're going to issue an appeal to the Supreme Court, but it's going to the Michigan Supreme Court, and it better be getting there pretty dang fast. And so that's what we're looking for. That's the path. All this legal track, I just want to kind of put the big picture together on this if I could. There is a media track right now. That media track is pushing that Joe Biden is president-elect, and they're going to keep pummeling you with that narrative to the point where you just roll over and say, well, like, if you repeat something often enough, then people start believing it's true. Please do not succumb to that lie. There's ample evidence that election integrity fraud was committed. And in the parallel track, we are pursuing the truth via the legal system, via the courts, which we have hundreds of affidavits of statutory violations and impairment of election or poll challenger duties, and examples of outright voter fraud. Some of the whistleblowers we have coming forward, one's a contractor for a Dominion voting system. Another is an actual poll worker. We got another one as a poll supervisor out in one of the poll precincts that we have a precinct tape that demonstrates that the tabulation machine results did not agree with the information that they submitted as poll workers in it. So something was being manipulated in the tab. All that data is out there. And so it's a race between when will people capitulate to this false narrative that Joe Biden is the president-elect versus us taking time to get the truth out via the legal process. So please hold fast. This is not over by any stretch of the imagination. And some of the things that we've seen happening in Michigan don't just impact the results in Michigan. They impact the results in other states as well. And we're all teaming up together now. Everybody is sharing information back and forth to make sure that when we see an example of fraud being conducted in another state, they're sharing it with us. We're going off and shaking the trees to verify that's happening here. And the cooperation and that's happening is amazing. And I want to say, too, there's people in the Republican Party that have not always gotten along that are now working together and cooperating to levels that I haven't seen since I've been initially a state senator back in 2011. So there's some good news amidst all the craziness in the world that's happening right now.
So, I think what we see with the individual voter is they believe they know that the true result of this, and it isn't just Michigan. Yeah. It's in Pennsylvania, it's in Wisconsin, it's in Georgia, possibly Arizona, and certainly Nevada. All of those areas are basically facing the same thing. I think this was a coordinated effort. There was much more than one state so that they could not focus resources in one place. It's also the reason that you'll notice that North Carolina and Alaska were never called early. And those are because they do not want Trump's number to get close to where we can narrow this down to 1 or 2 areas
Yep.
that we can expose this. Right. So we put all this energy in 7 different states and 7 different types of court systems with different legislatures. And in the meantime, you have the media saying, let's just all get along now.
Yeah.
Let's just all work together towards the Green New Deal and we'll all be happy and go down this road together. And I think the people are, thank God, rising up together. I put here on the bottom of the screen the Stop the Steal. It's a nationwide effort right now. The grassroots. I think the one thing, Patrick, that, and I know you were a part of the Tea Party movement. You were a part of that.
That's how it started. Yep.
Okay. It wasn't that long ago, right?
Yep.
But what we have here is we have the spirit of the American public. We have something instilled in us by our Creator that allows us, and especially as Americans, something the rest of the world in some ways doesn't understand, because we have had generations and generations of people knowing they're meant to be free.
Yeah.
They're going to rise up in times like these, whether they put a face covering over us, whether they try and lock us down, or whether the media tries to shut us up, or social media tries to segregate us. And that's what you're seeing with these groups. Not just us that have been taken down. All of the Trump organizations have been wiped because they want us fractured. They do not want us to be together. They don't want us speaking together, rising up together. They certainly don't want us continuing to come to the state capitals like that have been happening every day this last week. The media won't cover that either, by the way.
Yeah.
And now you have another event tomorrow. We call Stop the Steal. It is from 12 to 4 tomorrow. I believe you're
there
speaking there.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be there around what, 2:30, 3 o'clock, something like that tomorrow.
I'm slated to speak around 3 o'clock, I think.
Okay. And yes, I do. I have it at 3 o'clock. So just want everybody to know that you'll hear from a lot of patriots from around Michigan. A lot of these same places, they have had their information wiped off, which is why it is so important. A lot of you have been answering the call. We need you to go to the standupmichigan.com website. Give us your email address. We have a lot more for you to do, and I want to take you to the next step here. Once you go onto the website, you will immediately see a link to join. And the reason is we're going to need to stay in touch with you. This video will come in an email in the next 24 hours. We want you to forward that email to everyone so that they can watch it from there, because social media is not likely going to allow this to be shared. It's what happens. You'll look like you shared it. People won't be able to open it. It is where we're at today in this process, but we need to be able to spread the word. We have to do it, believe it or not, in America covertly, because that's what we're required to do. We're going to do whatever it takes. And one thing that Patrick talked about with me yesterday is a need to have some people help. And it's tough to get that word out. So I'm scrolling that here on the screen. And that is county by county data entry teams. And I want to ask that to you and see, you've done some, you mentioned Kent County, Macomb County. What exactly does this entail? Can they do it from home? Do they have to be from this county? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's kind of tedious exercise right now. And the fact that we don't have a precinct by precinct roll up at the state level is pathetic from my perspective. I mean, that's like a fundamental data set that we should have access to as the public. But what we're looking for is just a simple tally. And why we're asking people to do this is because every county captures this differently. Usually they put out a little PDF of their election results with precinct by precinct. Well, PDF often requires a manual data entry back into Excel. And ultimately, we want to get this into Excel so that we can put the formulas that we've put in place to analyze any variations and look for patterns in these votes that we can use as part of our evidence to assert that not only we got 140,000 votes that we think are manipulated, we think that it's even higher. So everybody can play a role in this. And there's going to be a lot of duplication of effort because, frankly, I don't have the bandwidth to go off and manage, okay, you do this county, you do that county, you do that county. So apologize for that. Somebody may be working on the same stuff. I got people out of state working on some of this data poll as well. Okay. But when it gets all said and done, I'll be posting this information. I'll put it up at letsfixstuff.org. Ron, you've got access. I'm sure you're going to post it up at standupmichigan.com, and we'll get that information out. But this analysis goes off and helps us identify how many votes are likely subject to this data manipulation that we're talking about. And we have to make that case as we're going through the courts, because if they sit there and say, well, you're only changing maybe 5, 10 10 votes here with these examples of voter fraud. Well, the judge is going to sit there and say, so what? It's not worth going off and issuing a revote on it. But if we can have damning evidence that suggests that, like the federal lawsuit asserts, that as many as 1.2 million votes are subject to election fraud, then now we got something else that we got to go off and look at. And if you want to be educated on all the different steps, everything we were talking about today, along with some detailed links to the lawsuits we're referencing, please go to letsfixstuff.org. I've created this site because all the censorship we're getting, just like Stand Up Michigan has been stood up because we're getting censored every step of the way. So we have to have alternative communication channels to get the news out. That's exactly why I set up letsfixstuff.org. And there's going to be a big post later today where I'm right now, right before coming on this show, I've been doing a deep dive into the system specs for Dominion voting systems. And I've identified some things that I think you're going to want to look at and understand, because it's going to be in the news flash for the next few weeks, because I think this was an IT theft that was going on. And frankly, it was an attempted coup. And for people who are familiar with the term influence operations from the military, it's tough to characterize what's happened in this election as anything but an influence operation. I describe what that means and what the implications are to our elections also out at Let's Fix Stuff. It's on a podcast called Let's Fix Election Integrity. And that was back in August of this year. So there's a lot of information out there. The good news is I think a lot of people are more appreciative of the need to really do a deep dive on civics than they've ever done before. And so that's one of the other bright spots, but we got to get spun up on it. And Ron, thank you for the opportunity to get people to do this. I've got a template that I can share with you if you can post it on your website. I don't know if I shared that with you already yet.
We will. If I think you did, I think you emailed that to me. So I will get that and have it linked when we upload this to our locals.com site. From our YouTube, we will put that link in there as well as the link to the video. But I want you to see on here, this is Patrick's email address, which is patrick@mygrassrootsalliance.org. You can email him there if you are willing to do this work for your county or for counties that you're close to get the data for him. And you can go to the letsfixstuff.org site, learn more about some of those details, because we have got to, again, our grassroots activists can't just show up and listen and watch and talk about it. We actually have to get involved and help get these results done, because time is of the essence to prove as much as we can, as quick as we can, and be able to get this information in front of judges, both at the state level and on the federal level, to be able to stop the process before it's certified. Now, some other great news that
wait, Ron, before you get to that, just please be patient with me, because I'm literally getting thousands of emails a day now and thousands of phone calls. My phone's burning up on it. So if you don't see that I replied to you and submitting there, please be patient on it. And actually, just to separate that out, because that's like my main message traffic for folks outside. I apologize for this, Ron, but I should have said, send it to team@mygrassrootsalliance.org. That'll help me separate out the data entry information.
It is going to be team at.
Yeah, just team at. That'll allow me to parse it out so that I know that when somebody sends data to team at, I can go off and batch and start looking at all the.
Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. So everybody, again, send them to team at, so that, because again, he's only one person. It's like we're literally running around. We got the tiger by the tail thing.
So that other email address is valid. Just
yes,
that's for like high alert message traffic. I'm getting senior officials in DC sending me stuff on that. I don't want to lose it.
Okay, I understand. And the letsfixstuff.org. There is the website. You can watch that podcast that he had. You can see information there. Again, if you go to Stand Up Michigan, sign up for the emails, you'll get this email link. What we want you to do again is send this email with this embedded video and forward it to your email people, your email list, your friends and family, the people that think like you do. We've got to spread this word. Now, again, some great news, and I know Patrick will know about it, but Senator Tom Barrett, Senator Lana Tice sent a letter demanding again that there be an audit to the Secretary of State. It was a huge move as a stand-up group of our legislature. I see a lot of people saying, what are they doing? What are they doing? We have a good number of people that are doing relentless work from our legislature. I'm not talking about just the leadership. I'm talking about good, upstanding members that are becoming the voice of their parties. And that has been a big plus. And this letter was a terrific thing. It's been on national news today. Newsmax had the letter from them on this morning. There is a lot of good information coming there. One other thing I learned is not only do we have the federal situation, which says that the legislature is responsible for the electors, right, within to verify or validate these election results in their state. Therefore, they have to step up right now and give the time to make sure that they represent the people they represent, and that every vote that is legal is counted. Secondly, we found out that in the state constitution, the legislature actually has power over auditing, which means that it's beyond what is normal. Now, you could say, we're not going to validate this like the secretary or like the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania stood up and said, we're not going to validate until we do a comprehensive audit of everything in Pennsylvania. We want our legislature to say that, but now we find out that in the Michigan state constitution, they really have an authority.
Yeah.
And they have the obligation to make sure that that is done. And if it takes time, it takes time. We believe we can, because of the people like Patrick and those that are at the state and federal level right now, we can find those patterns and demonstrate those pretty easily if we have the resources and the time in which to conduct those. Do you believe that's true, Patrick?
Yes, and this is an opportunity for the legislature to stand up finally. Frankly, I've been very disappointed with what I've seen in their response to Governor Whitmer and COVID. I highlighted that the end game was to subvert our election, so I'm not surprised by what's been happening here. But now's a chance for them to go off and join the stand-up cry and actually honor their oaths of office and actually defend the rights of the governed. And this is a great opportunity. I know Lana, I know Tom personally, and I appreciate their efforts on this. We need to give them the support that they deserve when they do take a stand like this. We need to give them encouragement. And I want everybody to start rowing all in the same direction. So we've had some differences in the past all across the board, but one thing that I've noticed with all this, and I want to reemphasize it, is that people are starting to come together. And like I said, we even got Bernie supporters that are teaming up with us and libertarians coming together with Republicans. And we're all saying, this is bigger than any party affiliation. This is about the future of our country. And I'll tell you, if one of the statements that I made during election night, there was a time when some of the reported differences in votes between President Trump and President Biden was only 10 votes. And I remember seeing that. And here we are, I think it was the wee hours of the morning. And I sat there and go, guys, this is a critical time. That 10 votes could be something that you challenged or didn't challenge, something that you oversaw or you didn't oversee going on here in the city of Detroit, where we had 250,000 ballots cast. That 10 votes and your actions could be the difference between whether or not Michigan goes to Donald Trump. Whether or not Michigan goes to Donald Trump could be the difference between what happens with America. Are we going to go to this fundamental transformation crowd, or are we going to go off to the fundamental preservation crowd? And then what happens to the free world? So this idea that one person can't make a difference, one person can definitely make a difference. And don't depend on elected officials like Lana and Tom that are just standing up right now. And we appreciate that. But it's up to all of us to get the word out. Number one, don't get discouraged. Number two, don't believe the hogwash that's being pushed that says Joe Biden. Turn off the news. If that's all they're saying, just turn it off. Go to sites like Stand Up Michigan and other trusted news sources like OAN or whatever. Get that information directly from them. Epic Times has been great in this. Gateway Pundit's been very good on it as well. And I like Let's Fix Stuff. So I try to consolidate all this information. Let's get the truth out. And I think we're going to be victorious in the end. But this is not going to get any easier, people. This is the point where anybody who's read the book 1776 by David McCullough talks about what it took at Valley Forge and how the bloody trails were there when they were marching. Guys, and at Trenton, the Battle of Trenton, the bloody footprints on the way to a critical victory. I think we're on the way to a critical victory. Back in 2019, I said, will America or 2020 be America's finest hour? I don't think the book's been closed on that yet. I think we have an opportunity to take all this adversity we've experienced ever since the beginning of March through COVID to and even before that with all the impeachment stuff that was going on. And now through this election integrity mess, we've got an opportunity to clean house, get recalibrated, get a renewed appreciation for how precious America really is. And so I'm hopeful to that in that regard, but it is not going to be easy.
No. And the final thing for all of you out there is it is likely that we're going to have a call to action here shortly in regards to pushing some signatures onto forcing the legislature to make sure they follow the Michigan Constitution and demand a comprehensive audit. We'll get more information to you on that. I just want you to be teed up for that, because we're going to want to have that done as soon as possible. And this will be a great way for us, again, to get permanently connected together. Remember, if we have emails, we'll always be staying connected. And that's why we want you to sign up for that, because we don't know how these social connections will be. Joinourlocals.com. It's free. You've got a link that will also be on here, and we need you to be there, because it's the only place that some of these videos are going to end up being uploaded to, and we know that they'll stay. So we don't know the future here, but what we do know is that the American spirit is strong and well. We know that together we're going to accomplish, and they have, we said they've awakened a sleeping giant. They had no idea what they were dealing with, but we're not going away. No. And we're going to battle. And so what I'd ask you in closing, it would be, would you come back in a few days, give us an update when we have something pertinent, whether it is a call to action or whether it is an important update, so that we can stay in contact with our people here going forward.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll do. And just keep in mind, there's going to be a post on Dominion voting systems tonight. So I'm still working on that and putting the finishing touches on it, but that'll highlight why some of these technology concerns that I've cited before are such a concern when it comes to election integrity.
And those people, by the way, that you see in the legislature, including on the Republican side, the Democratic side, that are automatically going, hey, there's not enough, we all need to move on. Those people are the ones that are sitting there watching the news every day.
Right.
People that are looking at those polls from before, but they don't realize what they're dealing with. By the way, some of those people, and I'm not going to mention them by names, but they're in the comments here. They're people that do comments, and everybody likes to watch them and listen to them. But I got to tell you, 9 out of 10 of the comments on there are people saying, what are you talking about? No, we're not giving up. So they represent us.
We are making progress. And I'll tell you, here's how you can find out. And it's not, initially everybody was pushing the narrative in the media that says there is no such thing as voter fraud. Then the media narrative changed to there is no widespread voter fraud. So they're already accepting that there's voter fraud now. They're just saying it's not widespread. And now the narrative is changing to there is not sufficient widespread voter fraud to overturn the elections in key battleground states. So you know what the next media narrative is going to have to be? President Trump has been reelected for his second term in office. And by the way, a lot of stuff that we're seeing around election fraud, we have reason to believe it affects down ballot issues as well. And right now, the last time I checked on the spread for the U.S. House of Representatives, it was plus 18, I think, which means we got to flip about 9 or 10 seats to turn the responsibility of tearing up the State of the Union address to Speaker McCarthy.
Yeah, and we're leading in 9 of those. However, a lot of those are in those ballot harvesting California and New York districts. Yeah. And so the question is, are they going to be close enough? By the way, they are. A lot of those are within 1 point. But
I'm talking about in Michigan, though.
I know. I know.
We got 11th congressional district with Erica Shockey was relatively close. Paul Young, Alyssa Slotkin, that area. Guys, all these are in play from my perspective based on the data that we've been seeing, because what we're noticing is it appears that there's a flip from individual votes to straight party Democrat. So that can affect everything down ballot.
Well, we appreciate your time, Patrick. We know how busy you are. I was glad that you can join us. For all of you out there, we want to thank you again. Stay tuned. There'll be more coming very soon. We've been in touch with these senators. They're in Washington, D.C. They're in Lansing. Everybody is spreading around this state. And believe me, we are on the radar. But what we've created in a grassroots movement here in Michigan is being looked at from all over the country in those states that aren't in these battles, but they are rising up where they live too. And when you look at the 72 counties out of 83 that voted for Trump, and that's before we fixed this fraud, where in the world would those numbers be had we not fixed the fraud?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we see where they are. I believe that the numbers are strong. There is a mandate that we have, and that mandate again rides and sides with individual rights and freedoms.
Absolutely. That's where our
Thank you
Constitution
again,
lies.
Patrick. We will talk to you within a few days. Everybody have a great weekend. I know we'll be talking to you over the weekend. We appreciate your time. When you get this email, whether it is share this on your own personal page, if you're still on Facebook, from our YouTube channel, and then we'll be sending it to you in an email. If you're not on the email list, please sign up at standupmichigan.com and join our Locals, which is a community platform, so that we can share the truthful information with you outside of all the censorship that we're experiencing today. Have a great day, everybody. We appreciate you.
Knock 'em alive, everyone.